Welcome to our fourth Music of Epiphany program. I'm Carl Brune, the organist here at St. John's Lutheran Church in downtown Lombard, Illinois. I'm joined by my colleague, organist Paul Frazee, and our new, this week, videographer Mark Kornitz. Our first piece today will be played by Paul. It's a wonderful organ chorale prelude based on the very familiar Epiphany hymn number 397, As With Gladness Men of Old. This hymn tune is named Dix. It was written by Konrad Koscher from Stuttgart, Germany. He wrote 18 hymn tunes that we still have, and this is the only one that's in our current hymnal. This arrangement was written by Donald Rotterman, who was a graduate of Concordia University in River Forest. For many years, he was a minister of music at Zion Lutheran Church in Dallas. Even though he's retired, he still has 17 pieces or collections currently in print with Concordia Publishing House. Paul will play his arrangement of As With Gladness Men of Old. Our theme song for this entire Epiphany series is commonly referred to by church musicians as the Queen of Chorales. The words for this chorale, as you may recall, are O Morning Star, How Fair and Bright. It's number 395 in our hymnal. This week you will hear three variations based on this very old, splendid, and favorite melody. The first variation was written by Hans Friedrich Michaelsen, who is a church music teacher in Germany and a sort of neo-Baroque composer. He lived from 1902 to 1973. In this short piece, Michaelsen takes a familiar chorale melody and plays around with it in the accompaniment. Our second variation was written by the very significant French organist and composer Marcel Dupré. Like Mozart, he was a child prodigy. He lived from 1886 to 1971. At a future date, we will devote a longer portion of the program to him and his works. This is the first time we've played Dupré. But for now, just let me say that Dupré wrote several hundred pieces for organ, was a virtuoso performer, and played over 2,000 organ programs on concert tours, including the United States, Canada, and Australia, and all over Europe. Back in 1922, on one of his trips to America, he even played a concert to a standing room only crowd at Grace Episcopal Church in Oak Park. I believe he was the first organist to memorize the entire works of J.S. Bach. I just can't imagine anybody doing that. He was the organist at Saint-Sulpice Church in Paris from 1934 until his death in 1971 at the age of 85. By the way, Saint-Sulpice is a church mentioned in Dan Brown's 2001 novel, The Da Vinci Code, which many of you have probably read or seen the video. So enjoy Dupré's lovely arrangement of O Morning Star, How Fair and Bright. Next, Paul will play our third arrangement for today of our Epiphany theme song composed by Kevin Hildebrand. Hildebrand is a highly regarded Lutheran composer and conductor. He's a cantor at Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and teaches classes there in church music, theology, and gives organ lessons. He is a graduate of Concordia University in River Forest. One of his huge accomplishments is he was the editor of the 12-volume hymn prelude series that most Lutheran organists and many non-Lutheran organists use. This series contains a hymn prelude based on every single hymn tune in our Lutheran service book. Don't worry, for those of you who love this splendid melody, including me, we will have another variation or two for you for next week. Organists and composers have loved this chorale melody and text for years. Here's Paul playing our Epiphany theme song. Next, Paul will play two more Epiphany tunes. The first one is number 398, is Familiar, Hail to the Lord's Anointed. This variation was written by Henry Garricky, who wrote or arranged 26 hymns in our hymnal. His most famous original hymn in our hymnal is number 491, Up Through Endless Ranks of Angels. Then, Paul will play a less familiar and less frequently sung, but still a very fine piece. It has an unusual tune, Putnam. It's number 403, O Savior of Our Fallen Race. This arrangement is by Ken Koshi, whose music has been played a number of times in this series. Next, I will play the oldest arrangement of an Epiphany tune for today's program. It's a late 16th century arrangement by Samuel Scheidt. This hymn is a favorite of mine and one of our more frequently sung Epiphany hymns. It's number 402, The Only Son from Heaven. The sound of this particular chorale is a bit like the sound of a late Renaissance piece, a bit raucous, instead of the smooth-sounding pieces of Baroque pieces by people like Bach and Handel. Samuel Scheidt is considered the first internationally significant German Lutheran composer. He died in 1654. As a point of reference, J.S. Bach was not born till 31 years later in 1685. Next, I will play a less familiar Epiphany hymn that is not in the Epiphany section at the front of the hymnal, but is much farther back. It is a new Epiphany hymn. People do still write new hymns, and talks about light and life. It's number 914 and is entitled Light of Light, O Soul Begotten. This arrangement was written by Ralph Schultz, who is another graduate of Concordia and River Forest. For 15 years, he was the chairman of the music department at Concordia College in Bronxville, New York, and later became the president of that college. Dr. Schultz's arrangement here is based on an English tune, Westminster Abbey. This selection is quite in contrast to the previous one by Samuel Scheidt. Several people have asked me about the little buttons between the keyboards that Paul and I push a lot. These are called pistons, and they allow us organists to change the draw knobs, or these little white buttons on the side here, quickly. We preset them for the sounds we desire for each piece. Let me demonstrate if you can hear the changes. They are, I'll hit a chord. I will use 3 of these pistons in the next piece. Watch closely to see if you can see and hear these quick changes. The next piece I'll play is another Epiphany hymn that is also back in our hymnal. It's number 872, Come Thou Bright and Morning Star. The morning star is Jesus. We will be singing this hymn this coming Sunday morning in worship. The text is written by a person with a kind of long name, Christian Noor van Rozenroth. The arrangement I will be playing is by Phil Gehring, another of the great late 20th century and early 21st century composers and organ teachers. Dr. Gehring taught for decades at Valparaiso University. He died this past October at the age of 94. Next, I will play two short arrangements of the tune number 409, Hail, O Source of Every Blessing. The first arrangement is by Otto Abel, who is a new composer to our series. He wrote very little music, and this is the only piece that I've been able to find that he wrote. Otto Abel was born in Berlin in 1905. He was a composer as well as an organist and cantor at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Berlin from 1930 till 1970. He died unexpectedly on a vacation in 1977. The arrangement is a slightly decorated introduction to the singing of this hymn. The second arrangement of the same hymn tune is by Carl Schock. It was written in the form of a trio. As so many of Schock's work, it is two well-crafted and very interesting and flowing counter melodies played beneath the familiar melody which is heard in the soprano part. Paul will finish our program today with a second arrangement of the splendid tune Dix. This tune was paired by the hymnal editors with the Epiphany hymn text, as with Gladness Men of Old. This arrangement is by a wonderful composer from Fort Wayne, Indiana, Robert Hobby. Mr. Hobby is a director of music and organist at Trinity Lutheran Church there. He has degrees from Wittenberg University and Notre Dame, not Concordia. He has over 150 pieces of music in print for organ and or with choirs. His music is always well crafted, interesting, as well as a challenge to play. You will be hearing more of his fine works in the coming weeks. As usual, we would like to thank you for viewing and listening to this week's edition. We hope you have found today's program interesting, enlightening, and also comforting, especially in these challenging times. Next week, we will finish up Epiphany hymns and carols, and we'll feature a number of Transfiguration pieces. See if you can name your favorite Transfiguration hymn. Then we will move on to favorite Lenten selections. Paul and I would like to thank our new videographer, Mark Kornitz. Our usual videographer person, Rick Schultz, is on vacation in Florida, and nobody feels bad about that, the lucky guy. We are looking forward to working with Mark for at least the next near future. This is very exciting. If you have comments or suggestions or ideas for future programs, which we do hear and respond to, please send them to me at brune.saint.johns@gmail.com or call me at 630-707-7655. Keep well. Pray for our leaders here at our church, in our state, and nationally. These are changing and challenging times, and we need guidance from above. Go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.